Hi, I'm Steve Kaplan, the author of The Hidden Tools of Comedy and the Comic Hero's Journey, and I've been thinking a lot about how to be funny during a pandemic. Mark Twain is reported to have said that humor is tragedy plus time, but where's the humor in the middle of that tragedy? And we're all familiar with the concept of whistling past the graveyard, but how can you create comedy when you're stuck in that graveyard and there doesn't seem to be a way out? We're all feeling the stress. According to the National Center for Health Statistics, more than a third of American adults reported symptoms of an anxiety disorder. Last year, it was less than 1 in 12. 53% believe that the pandemic is taking a toll on their mental health. There's been a 20% rise in domestic violence incidents. 36% of Americans reported that coronavirus-related worry is interfering with their sleep. 18% say that they're more easily losing their tempers, and 32% say it has made them overeat. Okay, well, if I'm honest, let's make that 33%. By now, we're all familiar with Norman Cousins and the therapeutic effects of laughter. And it's not just anecdotal evidence. According to the Mayo Clinic, laughter enhances your intake of oxygen-rich air, stimulates your heart, lungs, and muscles, and increases the endorphins that are released by the brain. Moreover, laughter can release neuropeptides that help fight stress and reduce anxiety and help the body generate its own natural painkillers. Scott Weems, a cognitive neuroscientist and the author of The Science of When We Laugh and Why, writes that laughter releases bursts of dopamine, a hormone and neurotransmitter that signals pleasure and reward, and studies have indicated that it also can improve blood flow, immune response, pain tolerance, and might even shorten hospital stays. In these stressful times, humor can certainly relieve stress and divert us, but as comic artists, shouldn't comedy do more than just distract us while we're quarantined? Comedic arts can do more than simply deflect, turning trauma into punchlines. Comedy gives us the tools and the means to, as Freud put it, express the otherwise inexpressible. Comedy helps us process tragedy by giving us a broader view and other perspectives. But aren't there some things, some events that are too horrible, too tragic for comedy? Where comedy is gratuitous and in bad taste, like a pandemic or 9/11 or the Holocaust. There's actually a great documentary on comedy in the Holocaust called The Last Laugh. And in The Last Laugh, comics like Mel Brooks, Sarah Silverman, Judy Gold, and Larry Charles, as well as survivors of the Shoah, ponder the age-old questions of comedy and tragedy. According to one survivor, without humor, we wouldn't have survived. Humor played a large role in mental survival and stability. It counteracted the deception and lies because it was real. Humor and the laughter provoked provided an alternative way of internalizing abnormality. As Jerome Zoltan writes in Joking in the Face of Tragedy, said, in that situation, comedy creates community, connecting people dealing with the disaster. Or as Mel Brooks put it, humor is just another defense against the universe. Comedy isn't about making fun of tragedy. It's about talking about how humans behave, even in the face of tragedy. In The Last Laugh, Sarah Silverman says that comedy puts light unto darkness, and darkness can't live where there's light. That's why it's important to talk about things that are taboo, because otherwise they just stay in this dark space and they become dangerous. A little later in the film, Larry Charles, one of the writers on Seinfeld and the director of Borat, says that comedy in situations like that touches the dark part inside. The taboo joke allows you to purge and have a catharsis. People subconsciously need to tap that dark part, that id-like part of their psyches. Eli Wiesel, when asked about humor in the Holocaust, said that there was nothing categorically funny about their situation, but in order to survive, they had to look at their circumstances through a different lens. It's our responsibility as comic artists to see the world through that different lens. As one of the other survivors later in the film put it, it would be a horrible life for me for 70 years to just cry. In March of this year, Alain de Botton, a British philosopher, wrote an extraordinary op-ed in the New York Times entitled Camus and the Coronavirus. You might remember that Camus famously wrote about an infectious disease that passed from animals to human that devastated a small city in French Algeria, the plague. Botton writes that Camus, to prepare himself for the book, immersed himself in the history of plagues. He read about the Black Death that killed an estimated 50 million people in Europe in the 14th century, the Great Plague of London of 1665, as well as plagues that ravaged cities on China's eastern seaboard during the 18th and 19th century. Camus was not writing about one plague in particular, Botton writes, nor was this narrowly, as has sometimes been suggested, a metaphoric tale about Nazi occupation. He was drawn to his theme because he believed that the actual historical events that we call plagues are merely concentrations of a universal precondition, dramatic instances of a perpetual rule that all humans are vulnerable to being randomly exterminated at any time by a virus, an accident, or the actions of our fellow man. For Camus, there was no escape from our frailty. Being alive always was and always will be our underlying condition, our pre-existing condition. This is what Camus meant when he talked about the absurdity of life. Recognizing this absurdity should lead us, in Camus' opinion, not to despair, but to a tragic comic redemption, a softening of the heart, a turning away from judgment and moralizing to joy and gratitude. In films such as Jojo Rabbit, 3, Billboard, Silver Linings Playbook, Grand Budapest Hotel, Life is Beautiful, there's no subject that can't be approached in a comic vein. The often difficult part is finding the right purchase, the right angle of attack. You can't make fun of tragedy, but you can find comedy in our flawed humanity, in our myriad, sometimes crazy, sometimes ludicrous reactions to that tragedy. Jojo Rabbit is about Hitler and Nazis. Silver Linings Playbook is about mental illness, adultery, failure. And also, it's a wonderfully funny romantic comedy. Modern and postmodern comedy is often a precarious balancing act between tragedy and absurdity. But it's part of our obligation as writers, directors, performers, as comic artists to find that balance and share it with our community. In his book, Following the Equator, Mark Twain wrote, "The secret source of humor itself is not joy but sorrow. There is no humor in heaven. Comedy may come from sorrow, but it can also help and heal us. As one comic said, there are tragedies that we can never laugh at, but we must laugh our way through them." I'm reminded of a tale in the Talmud where the prophet Elijah said that there will be rewards in the next world for those who bring laughter to others in this one. And who are we to ignore a prophet? One of my favorite writers is Sholem Aleichem, who was a great Yiddish writer and humorist from the 19th century. And he once wrote that life is a blister on top of a pimple and a boil on top of that. The world is full of miserable creatures who do miserable things. So just for spite, I'm not going to cry. Just on spite, there's going to be laughter. Stay safe, be well, be good, create comedy. Thank you.